Hello all. So far we have completed 3 units in which we have discussed about what NLP is, what are the different applications of NLP, how do we do text pre-processing in NLP, and then we have seen sequential labeling models, language modeling models, and then in unit 3 we have seen sequence to sequence models and various case studies on how do we implement translation, machine translation using sequence to sequence model, text classification, and then we've also seen how to build a chatbot. So in this session, we will start with Unit 4. Unit 4 is all about attentions and transformers. So these are the contents that we're going to cover in Unit 4. So we'll see what is attention, and then we'll see what is attention mechanism, and then we'll see how do we build sequence to sequence models with attention mechanism, what are transformers and what is self-attention. We will see transformer based language models, which are LLMs, and then we'll see the first case study, which is spell checker, and then we'll see transfer learning, but bidirectional encoder representation of transformers, and then one case study, sentiment analysis using BERT model, and then what are the other pre-trained language models available, and then we'll also see another case study, which is natural language inference using BERT. Let's get into the topic 1. So far we have discussed so many different applications of NLP which can be processed using recurrent neural networks, that is RNNs. So we have seen RNNs are powerful models that can be used for building various NLP tasks such as sentiment analysis, language translation, building chatbots, POS tagging, name entity recognition, etc. Right? So in this unit, we'll see even more powerful NLP models, which are called as the transformers. Okay, so similar to sequence models that we have seen in the last unit, transformer models are also encoder decoder based neural network architectures with this concept called self attention. Okay, so no doubt the revolution of AI or generative AI has come into picture with the evaluation of transformers since 2017. So not only these are powerful models, but also transformers are used for building most of the modern NLP pre-trained models, which are chat GPT-2 or generative pre-trained models that we are using with us, and also BERT model, which we are going to cover in this unit. Okay, so the developments that have been taken place with evaluation of transformers, we call that as the era of the transformer. So in this unit, we'll start with what is attention, what is that attention mechanism, and then we'll see how do we implement this attention mechanism into the transformer models. Okay, so let's come into the first topic, which is what is attention. Okay, so in the last unit we have seen sequence to sequence models are the modern NLP models, which take sequence as input and converts that into another sequence. For example, we have looked into machine translation or language translator, where encoder block takes input in source language and the decoder block will convert the input from one language to the target, that is the output language, right? So sequence to sequence models were versatile, they were powerful. We had implemented many applications using sequence to sequence model, but even then we can see that sequence to sequence model also has some limitations. When I talk about the limitation, as you can see here in the architecture, we have seen this example when we have discussed about sequence to sequence model in the last sessions, right? So we have encoder model which will take the tokens as input in the source language, and these tokens of input would be converted to one fixed vector representation, one fixed vector size sentence representation. Okay, and this sentence representation of the input language will be decoded by the decoder into the corresponding target language. This is what we have seen in the previous sessions, right? So when we talk about this sequence to sequence model, we have seen they consist of encoder decoder, and the encoder takes sequence of tokens in the source language and runs through the RNN blocks, or cells, RNN cells or LSTM cells or GRU cells, whichever the model you choose, and produce a fixed length vector at the end. This is the sentence representation that we get at the end. Okay, and this decoder model will take this sentence representation and input and start converting the input tokens into the target language token by token. Okay, so when we look into the architecture, it looks simple and powerful, but that does not translate sentences as per the expectations. The accuracy of those basic sequence to sequence model will not reach our target for various reasons. So one of the most important reason is the size of the vector here. Okay, as you can see, no matter how length the sequence is, the output here of the encoder block is of fixed length. Okay, which is the major drawback. Okay, so as you can see, the size of the vector is fixed no matter how long or short the source sentence is. So this is the huge bottleneck of the sequence to sequence model. Okay, so compressing such huge sentences into one fixed vector may not work for longer sentences or lengthier sentences, but it works well for short sentences. But we cannot limit our model only for short sentence. So for that reason, to overcome this disadvantage of sequence to sequence model, where irrespective of the sequence input, the output is a fixed length, we go for implementing attention mechanism. Okay, so here this attention mechanism, instead of relying on that single fixed length vector where all the information is represented, where the decoder takes that. Instead of doing that, this mechanism will refer to some parts of the encoder. It generates the input of the encoder into some parts which are called as tokens. Okay, this is similar to how actually human translator refer to the translation input. That is, no matter how many lengthier the sequence they want us to translate, we divide that into tokens and try to translate sentence by sentence. Okay, so this particular method is achieved by attention mechanism, which is basically focuses on some specific part of the input and computes it context dependent summary. Instead of focusing on the fixed vector, it focuses on generating context dependent summary. Now let's see what is that context dependent summary. It is all about when given a huge sentence that will be divided into some sort of key value pairs. Okay, the input information will be divided into some key value pairs, and this would be compared to a query. Okay, that query comes from the decoder block, which acts as a predicted output. Okay, sample predicted output. Now the stored values are not just single vector, but usually they are list of vector. So for each key value pair, we compare that with the query with respect to a attention function. Okay, now let's see that in the figure here. This is the figure that illustrates the attention mechanism. As you can see here, the entire paragraph that I am giving as input would be generated into key value pairs. Okay, now these key value pairs would be compared to the query with respect to this function f, which is called as attention function. Once it is compared, they generate some scores. Okay, so that scores, when normalized, we get some attention weights. So the more the attention weights are, the more information or context is there in that particular key value. For example, if I give you 4 sentences, okay, so a paragraph with 4 sentences, so each sentence is given as one key value pair, and the sentence which holds most importance out of those 4 will have the highest attention weight. Okay, so depending upon this, we will assign some values and weights and then go for summation of individual key value attention weights that we are getting. So I will process this entire illustration into 3 steps. In step 1, the inputs to attention mechanism are the values and their associated keys. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, next, these input values can take many different forms, but in NLP they are usually list of vectors. Okay, now for sequence to sequence model, the key values are nothing but the hidden states of the encoder where token by token input is given. Okay, so once the value pairs are decided, each key will be associated with a value. Now that key value will be compared against the query using this function, which is called as attention function. Okay, by applying f to the query and each one of the keys, we will be getting some scores. Okay, scores for one key value pair. Now we will normalize them to obtain some attention weights. Okay, now the specific function f actually depends upon the architecture, that we will see in the next session. What is this f and how do we take that? Okay, now for sequence to sequence model, this gives us the distribution over the input tokens. I am not taking the entire sentence into one vector representation, but I am distributing the input tokens into key value pairs and generating the attention weights of them. Okay, the more relevant an input token is, the larger the weight it gets. Okay, and then finally the input values are weighted by their corresponding weights obtained in step 2, and they're finally summed up to compute the final summary of that particular vector for translation process. Okay, so because of this step 3, the output of the attention mechanism is always not a fixed vector but weighted sum of the input vectors which are divided. Okay, how they are weighted is determined by the attention weights, which in turn are calculated from the keys and the query. Basically, attention mechanism computes context dependent summary of the input, not fixed vector like how sequence to sequence models encoder block generates. Okay, when you downstream all the components of the neural network, the decoder of RNN is similar to sequence to sequence model. Only there is change in the encoder where we implement attention mechanism. Okay, so basically the attention mechanism is a technique that is used in machine learning and AI to improve the performance of NLP models. Okay, how do we improve the accuracy? By focusing on the relevant information. Basically, it allows us to select or give attention to different parts of the input, assigning various degrees of importance, 50%, 30%, 10%, 10% of, depending upon weights of different elements, we give importance, and then we go for summation of the inputs. Okay, so this is how your attention mechanism works. Basically, we are altering the basic sequence to sequence model with this mechanism called attention mechanism, with which not just by processing the entire sequence and generating one fixed size vector sentence representation, but we generate key value pairs of the tokens generated at the encoder and try to get the summary, context dependent summary, by adding summation of all the weights generated. So this is all about what is attention mechanism. Thank you.